You could easily say that Oppenheimer is one of the most anticipated movies of the year, with a star-studded cast and an incredible director depicting one of the most important moments in human history. This film had everything that you need to win Best Picture of the Year. However, did we overhype Oppenheimer? Did we talk way too much about the 70mm IMAX film and the star-studded cast and what it took to actually make this movie rather than the movie itself? We're gonna take a deep dive into the people in front and behind the camera and talk about everything it took to make this film. What made this film great, and in my opinion, what made it bad. First of all, I just want to start by saying I'm a huge fan of Christopher Nolan. In my opinion, he's one of the best directors of our time. He was the director for Interstellar, Inception, and the Batman Dark Knight trilogy. However, his last couple of movies, Dunkirk and Tenet, have had a pretty polarizing effect on his audiences, leaving people a little bit confused and even underwhelmed. There is absolutely no doubt, from a filmmaking perspective, Christopher Nolan pushes the boundaries of what we think is possible to achieve in film. But the real question is, what Christopher Nolan film are we gonna get? Are we gonna get a film that's character driven and that makes you empathize and feel for them like we do in Interstellar? Or are we gonna get a movie like Tenet that really hits you with so much information you can easily leave the theater feeling a little bit confused and no attachment to the story or the character? Now, before we break down Oppenheimer, I really think it's important to know some of the key members Nolan put together in order to make this film and why that's important. Now, starting at the top, you have Christopher Nolan, who wrote and directed Oppenheimer. The DP of the film was Hoyt van Hoytema, who was the cinematographer for Interstellar, Dunkirk, and Tenet. The editor of the film was Jennifer Lane, and the first time that she worked with Nolan was on Tenet. And then you had a young up-and-coming composer, Ludwig Göransson, who also worked with Nolan on Tenet. Now, while everybody on this team is absolutely incredible at what they do, there are a few common denominators that have assisted Nolan in the past in making some of his best films that were actually not on this team. And after watching Oppenheimer, it makes perfect sense. And I'm gonna explain to you guys who these people are and why they're so crucial in Nolan's success in the past. But first, let's jump in and start talking about Oppenheimer. I'm gonna do my absolute best not to spoil the film for you guys, but I will say that if you haven't seen Oppenheimer, I would watch that first before you watch this. Come back and watch this and see if we see eye to eye. Right in the beginning of the film, it had me hooked. The editing and the sound design was extremely dynamic and very well done, and I have to say that the first couple minutes I was super excited. The movie was giving me the same vibe as films like The Imitation Game and A Beautiful Mind, which are both amazing films that I love. However, the pacing of the edit was pretty fast. We start off with Oppenheimer being in college, and as the audience you can kind of get an understanding that this isn't really a happy time for him. His professors don't seem to actually respect him, and the other students seem to mock him and laugh at him. But here's where I noticed the first problem with the movie. I noticed the pacing of the edit was so fast that I didn't have any time to actually sympathize or get to know my character and really feel what he was going through. It really just felt kind of rushed, and they grazed over this really important character building moment in order to meet Werner Heisenberg. Now, was this a huge deal? Not necessarily. I didn't think it was going to make or break the movie. However, I do feel like they missed an opportunity to develop the character a little bit and allow the audience to kind of connect with him and care enough about who he is and where he came from. Now, within the 5 to 10 minute mark, it still feels like they're really trying to give you all this information in a really fast-paced way because they're still trying to get to that moment in time where most of the film is going to take place. But about 15-20 minutes in, I noticed that this pacing of the film never really slows down. It kind of just keeps going on this fast track to where we're trying to get to with no foreseeable stop in sight, and we still haven't taken a moment to really let the dust settle and figure out where we are in the film. Now, through the next act, you meet Jean, who becomes Oppenheimer's lover that I guess he cares deeply about. But just like everything else to this point, they never really let you take a moment and care about her or their relationship at all. You just kind of get this idea that she's emotionally damaged and she's not really trying to have a strong emotional relationship with Oppenheimer. It's more of just a sexual relationship, which I'm not really understanding, nor am I connected to either one of them in this relationship. And then when Oppenheimer meets his wife, Kitty, again, they just kind of graze over it. I don't really care about her or their relationship, and they don't do a good job of building anything sentimental for the audience to really care about. And then about halfway through the film, Jean dies and Oppenheimer's destroyed. To me, this has no weight because, again, you don't really care about her or him or their relationship. And I totally get that this movie is not about Oppenheimer's love life. It's not about his relationships. It's about how he created the atomic bomb. I get it. But the real point that I'm trying to make here is not necessarily so hung up on these relationships or how they depicted those relationships. It's more about the lack of compassion that I have for our main character because they never really developed anything. They never really gave us anything to care about. So when he is going through his internal crisis, I don't really have a care about him or his emotional conflict or his relationship conflicts. I was just kind of left feeling a little bit flat. But of course, as I'm watching, I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt because it is a beautiful film. It looks great. It sounds great. But I'm still waiting for that thing that's going to move me. The climax of the film is when they create the bomb and they drop it on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. At this point, this is supposed to feel like the most emotional and horrific moment in human history. And this is where you need to really drive that feeling home. And the whole thing to me just felt a little underwhelming. I was waiting to see how the bomb dropped or news clips or footage or something really horrific. There was really none of that. It was just, Oppenheimer making a speech to the audience that they did it. He was going through this internal conflict, obviously. And then they tried to, show us a little bit of a glimpse of what that bomb would look like by showing him looking at people in the audience, getting their face melted and like dead corpse being on the floor. And I get maybe you don't want to show the horror of all of that, but I just felt like we needed more. I felt like that climax was just a little bit flat and it didn't really give me anything emotional. Personally, I didn't feel the remorse from Oppenheimer or the horror or severity of this moment. And then the whole next act was all just focused on this trial. In my opinion, at no point in the movie did I really care about anyone specifically in the film. And then on top of it all, they made this trial out to be such a big part of the story. It felt like it took away from the development of the characters. It took away from the connection that you could build with these characters because they were so focused on this trial. And I get, which was a big part of the politics and everything that goes into what scientists have to do to make something and create something, and then the aftermath that they have to deal with. In my opinion, there was so much information that they were trying to give to you that they missed the opportunity to really connect with the audience on an emotional level. To me, this was by far the biggest issue of the film, and most importantly, I want to talk to you guys about why this was an issue. But in order to do this, we got to talk about Christopher Nolan's brother, Jonathan Nolan, who is a screenwriter that works side by side with his brother to produce films like Interstellar, The Dark Knight Trilogy, Memento, and The Prestige. And another important factor was editor Lee Smith, who was also with Nolan during all his greatest hits. Now, if you take a look at Nolan's last three films, which was Oppenheimer, Tenet, and Dunkirk, to me, they all had the same issue. They lacked that real human emotion and connection, and let's be real, it just fell flat. While Tenet is beautiful eye candy to watch, I never really had a connection with any of the characters, and same thing with Dunkirk. I mean, from a filmmaking perspective, it was beautifully made. The sound, the music, the shots, just everything was incredible, but there wasn't one point in the movie where I was really rooting for a character. I just felt like I was watching a bunch of things happen. And I hate to say it, but Oppenheimer felt very similar in that sense. And guess who wasn't involved in those three films? His brother and screenwriter Jonathan Nolan, and while Lee Smith was the editor in Dunkirk, he wasn't involved in Tenet or Oppenheimer, which really makes you begin to question, can Christopher Nolan make a great film without his brother? And the answer is yes, he can, but he hasn't done that in a long time since Inception back in 2010. Now, we all can agree that Christopher Nolan is a great mind and a great director. His ability to build worlds and complex ideas and turn them into entertaining films is incredible. But with all that being said, it really makes you realize how important it is to have not just one great mind working on a film, but many great minds who know how to work and collaborate together. And if I'm Christopher Nolan, I'm definitely calling up my brother to help me write and produce my next film. Now, with all of this being said, I want to take a second and give it up to the actors because, in my opinion, while the storyline and the screenplay was a little flat, I do think that they performed very, very well in this film. I thought the subtlety of Cillian Murphy's acting with his facial expressions and how he handled certain moments in that film was absolutely incredible. I think that he did a great job for what he had. And of course, with no surprise, the supporting cast did an amazing job as well. But when you have actors like Emily Blunt and Matt Damon and Rami Malek and Florence Pugh, I mean, all of these are incredible A-list actors that did an absolutely stunning job. But in my opinion, the aspects of the film that I was really blown away by was the music, the sound design, and the color of the film. Now, Christopher Nolan usually works with Hans Zimmer, who is a film scoring legend and has produced some of the most iconic film scores over the last 30 years. But in this particular film, he decided to work with Ludwig Göransson, who is a young and up-and-coming composer who I personally think absolutely killed it. In my opinion, the film score was a perfect balance of traditional and modern film scoring, using a lot of synths and ambient sound beds that were literally perfect for every single mood in the film. And you know the film score is really, really good when you don't actually hear the score, you feel it. The sound design was absolutely insane. It was epic. Even the moments where they decided not to use sound and leave it completely empty, I thought, in my opinion, was genius. There was certain shots where there was a lot going on, an explosion, or like certain little cuts and little edits with no sound in it that I was just like, that was perfect. Like, the fact that there's no sound there is genius. And the last thing that I wanted to tip my hat to was the color of the film, but more specifically, the skin tones were insane. It felt like I was literally looking through a window when I was looking at this screen. There was a shot of Cillian Murphy while he's outside talking to Albert Einstein, and I just noticed the perfect lighting and the perfect color of his skin tones. It was like magic, man. And you know, I think that you'll only appreciate this if you actually have color graded a film before, you color grade anything. But if you look at this, to me, in my eyes, it was an absolute work of art. A mixture of the cinematography and the color grading, it just came together so beautifully in a lot of these shots that were just incredible. Now, with all of this being said, this is just my personal opinion, but I'm curious, how did you guys feel about the movie? Did you guys see it? What did you guys think about it? Did you like it? Did you love it? Drop some comments down below and let me know. And if you guys want to learn more about filmmaking, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Deuces.